One, two, three. This is Dr. Alex Avila with Love University, and we're back. I'm an author, psychologist, and speaker, and every week we talk about how to improve yourself, love, relationships, self-esteem, and happiness. And we've been having some really nice guests on the show, and today we have a very interesting guest. I'm really happy to have her on board in the business area and also in personal relationships. This is Tillis Lederman. She's an MBA from Columbia University, a speaker, trainer, coach. She's the author of 4 books, including 11 Laws of Likability, an upcoming one, which I think we'll talk about maybe this time or a little bit next time, The Connector's Advantage. She's a Forbes Top 25 professional networker, NYU professor, executive, and her clients range from nonprofit, government to Fortune 500. And that's a lot of things. Welcome, Michelle, on board.
Thank you.
And what I really was interested in, it says you're a recovering CPA and you rescued 2 dogs. Now, the recovering CPA, what happened with that? Were you in that field before?
I was. I'm a CPA in 2 states, and I worked in finance for over a decade.
Yes.
And actually, it's where I saw some of the challenges that I now teach people how to avoid.
I see. And then rescuing 2 dogs, that's pretty cool. I just got a beautiful golden retriever puppy, about 3 months old. And they're very cute. What did you do to get your dogs?
I have been doing animal rescue work most of my life, and once I had kids, it was a little hard to, bring in animals that might be unpredictable. So I waited till the youngest was 5, and then I went out to the nearest shelter and picked a puppy up and brought it home. And
okay. What kind of puppies do you have?
So the first one was a Lab Husky mix.
Oh, wow.
And she's 6 now, and my newest addition is about a little over 2 years old, and she's a Catahoula Leopard, Australian Shepherd, mutt type of thing.
Okay, interesting.
But they are the best, and usually mutts are much healthier, so if anyone's out there thinking about a dog, go rescue one. There's plenty of these homes.
Yeah, and then the question is, are they likable? Actually,
incredibly, but for different reasons.
Yes, I have a new book coming out, Invincible You, and I talk about the charisma of a dog, how to get those traits. And you talk about that a lot in that the 11 Laws of Likability, and I really love your material. So, Michelle, how do you define likability? I think you mentioned something like trust and conversational ease. Tell us about that.
Well, likability is defined between 2 people. And so the idea is you cannot make somebody like you. And I put that out there right away. But you can enable them to see what's likable about you. And so for each interaction between 2 people, it's creating the space and the possibility to find that point of connection.
That makes sense, exactly. And you say something like, when you work with people you like, your productivity rises, and people like to work with people that they like.
Absolutely. There's so many studies out there that show how relationships impact you professionally. People would rather do business with somebody that they like. And even if the product is better, or even if the price is better, they will choose the relationship often over those aspects. And I'll ask everybody who out there listening right now to think about a store or company that you can't stand dealing with. Maybe it's your cable company or your cell phone company. Those are usually the top winners on the list.
Yes.
Sometimes it's an airline. But, for me, it is a cell phone company, and it doesn't matter what their deal is. I will never, ever, ever give them my business.
That makes sense. And, when I look at this material, I think of the idea of the personality types. I wrote a best-selling book, Love Types, on Myers-Briggs compatibility. I'm sure you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs.
I am.
And there's what we call the thinking personality. The thinkers are those who drive themselves through logic and analysis. So for a thinker, they would say, I want to get the best deal regardless of whether it's personal or whether it's a relationship. So how do you deal with thinking personality types that can actually in some ways become immune to some of the relational aspects, it seems like?
So thinkers tend to be a little bit more left brain, and they have data, stats, and logic. So let me give them the data, stats, and logic around why relationships are more powerful.
Yes.
When you are working with somebody that you do trust, you are tending to get better service, faster service, more reliable, right? So because sometimes when you work with somebody or the relationship exists, you can do things like today. I went to the car repair guy that I've been working with for at least 5 years.
Yes.
And I was there a week ago and it didn't get fixed. And I went back and they found a new problem. And at the end, I was holding my credit card out and he's like, put that away. And that's what happens. So there is quantifiable, there is financial, there is speed type of benefits to having that relationship, because you could get not preferential treatment, but another level of customer service. You mentioned before, in terms of other aspects of how the statistics impact, people who have close work relationships actually are boosting productivity by 50%, and it actually predicts their happiness at work.
Yes.
So when they're happier, they're more engaged, they're more productive, that's directly impacting your bottom line.
That's great. Now, I'm kind of curious, are you an ENFJ on the Myers-Briggs by any chance?
ENF, yes. I used to be an ENTJ, believe it or not. When I was in my finance days, I was an ENTJ.
Okay, so you went from the general to the growth teacher on the love types personality. So that's good.
Yeah, I can go between an N and an S. I do lean towards the N, but it's not my biggest differentiator.
I see. Now, I'm a feeler myself, and I always believe in the relational versus the transactional style, but there are people that do like the more transactional component. I think the thinker people. But the other idea is, what if we get to the extremes? Now, let's say, Michelle, would you take an extremely competent but unlikable employee or an extremely incompetent and likable employee?
I always say I will hire attitude over aptitude, because aptitude can be taught.
Okay, but what if they're just incompetent and just, that's just not their thing? They're not good at what they do, and they'll never be good at it, but they're very nice people. Would you keep them on board, or would you fire them and get someone who's competent and nice?
I would probably coach them out. And it's something I have done in my career.
Yes.
I had when I was back in my finance days, I was on an audit, and I had a boy who, he was 21, 22 years old, and I was only maybe 22 or 23 at the time.
Right.
So I'm managing people at a very young age, and I wasn't skilled at it.
Yes.
And I had to give him his feedback, and he was awful. He was absolutely awful. He didn't understand the purpose of an audit.
Yes.
And I was very frustrated with his work product, and it was awful. And I got him on another audit, and I was so frustrated. And again, does not meet expectations on the review.
Right.
And the boy cried.
Oh, no.
Yes. And I'm thinking, oh, my God.
You made him cry. You were a thinker in those days. You were a little mean.
It wasn't that I was mean. It was that, yes, I worked I was in a male-dominated industry.
Yes.
Managing men, sometimes older than me.
Right.
And you had to work a certain way, whether that's how you felt. Yes. It's how you had to work. And so I felt terrible about it. That wasn't, what I wanted. And so I went back to the drawing board, and I let him recover, and I came back into the room, and I said, listen, I've done you a disservice. I said, I've only focused on what hasn't worked, and let me tell you what has. And I told him that the client loved him. I told him that I appreciated his work ethic. He worked very hard. He was always on time. The client, enjoyed being around him. He was very, there was all these great aspects. He was very relational.
Yes.
But he didn't understand the work. So I actually have been in this exact situation. And I asked him, I said, what is it that you like about the work? Why did you go into this field? And what we uncovered together through a conversation was that, it wasn't the right fit for him.
I see where you're saying.
And I said to him, you would be amazing in HR.
Ah, okay.
And within 6 months, he had transferred into HR and was very happy.
I see. Well,
right? So that's how I would approach it. It's not that I would throw the baby out with the bathwater. I would seek to say, let's understand why this isn't working.
Right.
Because here's what works for you, and here's what doesn't. So let's come up with a new solution.
Right. But what if the sweet guy says, I want to be a juggler. I don't want to work in business. Now what do you
Okay. Well, then I encourage you to go follow your dreams.
Yes.
And let me know if there's something I can do to support you. But let's have a plan for your exit strategy.
That's great. That's a very compassionate. You sound like a very compassionate person. You care about people.
Yeah, but I'm also going to say we need an exit strategy. It's not that I'm going to allow a company or a business to suffer as a result.
Right. Exactly. That makes sense. Now, the other thing, Michelle, I think you mentioned this in some other materials. The idea is this likability, is it genetic or learned? And, we have things like the big five agreeableness factor in psychology. There's certain factors that some people may change over time and become more agreeable or less agreeable. And then another study showed that kids that are coming from difficult environments, if they can overcome that, oftentimes they have a pleasing personality. Their temperament in a pleasing way is what it helps them succeed. So what do you tell people that, I'm not very likable genetically, what do I do?
Absolutely can be learned. And actually, you mentioned the book that I have coming out in March of 2019 called The Connector's Advantage. That's actually what I'm trying to teach in that book. So it's a follow-up to the 11 Laws of Likability.
Oh, great.
This book is about understanding the drivers of connection and what it is that enables two people to find that likability between the interaction. The connector's advantage is to explain that connectors have a certain way of doing and thinking and acting, that relationships are critical to your success, and that anybody can learn these behaviors, these attitudes, these attributes to infuse them into their connections and reap those same rewards. So absolutely, I am teaching nature is not the ruler, that we can nurture ourselves into aspects that enhance our abilities.
Yeah, that's really great, especially with brain plasticity. People can change their brain chemistry over time, so we know that can occur.
It's
now,
also muscle memory. It's learned behavior.
Yes, definitely. Now, Michelle, the other thing is, what if we take a little paradoxical approach and say, what are the advantages of unlikability? Now, I'm thinking of a collector, a parking meter person, or even some attorneys can be kind of disagreeable by nature and actually do well in that area. Is that possible to have a disagreeability advantage?
A disagreeable advantage. It's funny. I remember as coming up through, my transition out of finance and into this world, and going through some of the programs myself. And I remember one program where they give you these adjectives that you want to embrace. Right. And I think the adjectives they wanted to give me were open, vulnerable, things like that.
Yes.
And I was thinking, no, thank you. Closed works just fine for me, is what I said to them. Ah. And she turned to me, she goes, you think it is, but it's not. Hmm. And I would say to those people who take a disagreeable approach, there might be some ways that you think it's paying off, just like closed might have paid off for me in some ways. But in a holistic view, it's not working in its entirety. And it's not working on every plane for you. Right.
Well, I'm thinking of a gruff pit bull attorney that's really tough and slams the phone down and even curses. But they get the job done. They get people intimidated and scared, and they win their case.
Maybe. But you know what? That might not be the reason that they win. And maybe they would have actually gotten a better result had they taken a different tact. Sometimes they think they've won.
Right.
But then what happens is the next time I come up against you, I'm going to take a completely different tact with you, and you have now I have a one-up on this case, and I'm giving you nothing.
I see. So we can have puppy dog attorneys instead of pit bull attorneys? Is that what we
I don't think it's an either or. I don't think it's puppies or pit bulls. I think if we're using the dog analogy, which I love.
You love dogs, so I thought I'd do that for you.
Right. Dogs are highly intelligent. They're intuitive. They read body language and understand how to adapt to what's in front of them. So they're looking at each individual and they're not saying, I'm going to be like this with everybody. I have a dog outside and she knows when the UPS guy comes up, she doesn't bark at him. She sits and waits for her dog treat. But when the mailman came up and maced her, she goes nuts over the mail truck. So it's not that she's going to bark at everybody. It's a choice, and that's what we're always doing in building connections. It's a choice, and it's not universal approach. It's your approach with a particular person.
Yeah, I like that, situational or personal. So, Michelle, let's get into the laws of likability, because I really love this material. It's done in a very easy to understand, but deep way. And I think you mentioned the first law is called the law of authenticity. This is something that I really like. We talk a lot about it on Love University. Being your true best self. Why is that so important?
So the law of authenticity is law number one. For me, it's the thread or the foundation to enable connection. Yes. And I define it as the real you is the best you.
Yes.
Now, I've had a lot of people come up, just as you were saying, and say, well, the real me is a jerk. And I have a definition of authenticity that I actually use in the new book coming out called The Connector's Advantage, which is that authenticity is showing up open and infusing into your actions the qualities of yourself that you value the most. And part two, for all those jerks out there, it's about flexing and accepting your unique charms. So there's two parts to it. It's one, having appreciation for yourself and what you bring to the table. And if what you bring to the table is energy, then bringing that energy to everything that you do, or whatever your words are.
Right.
And then you'll share the giveaway at the end. I actually give people an activity to help figure out what their words are so that they can bring that authentic brand.
Right.
But the other part of this is understanding that we have to adapt. We don't need to change who we are, but based on who's across from us, we might need to flex. And flexing is the momentary, temporary adjustment of your style to enable a better interaction with somebody else. So when I talk about flexing our unique charms, those charms are those personality traits or aspects of ourselves that might not always work to our favor. Sometimes people love them. I'm really talkative and people love that. And sometimes they don't.
I get it. Now, one thing I like about what you're saying, especially with introvert or shy people, I wrote a book called The Gift of Shyness back in the day that talks about the positives of the introvert and shy person. They're often good listeners, they're sensitive, but it can be a challenge in the business world and even in dating and relationships if you're introvert or shy. So what if someone says, well, I'm authentically introvert and shy. I don't like to be around a lot of people. I love my own time and space. And also I'm a little bit shy and sensitive. What do you say to those folks?
So sensitive and shy don't necessarily go hand in hand. When we think about the introvert, that doesn't mean that they aren't comfortable in situations. It just means it's how, and with MBTI, it's how they re-energize.
Right.
So what I say to the introverts is, one, yes, know your strengths. Two, create environments in which it works for you. So it doesn't mean that you don't go to these large events, but maybe you volunteer, maybe you go early. There are ways that you can put yourself in a position where it's a little less exhausting. Give yourself breaks. Go with a buddy. And there's different things. Some people say don't go with a buddy. Some people say take an extrovert with you. I married an introvert.
Oh, okay.
And I am highly extroverted.
Yes. That can pose challenges for extrovert females with introvert males if they don't respect each other's style. Because
I think when they say opposites attract, I always say that when it comes to communication and thinking style, opposites attract. When it comes to interests and hobbies, similarities attract. Because you want to be able to do things together, but then you also can create balance. And so my husband and I are very different. And, he's a P, he's an I, I'm a J and an E. So on the ones that are most defining of our personality types, we are opposites. Right. And when he went back to business school that I had graduated from many years earlier, he was used to me kind of, navigating the conversations and kind of being a voice and helping him step in. And I just said, yeah, I've done this already. I'm just your wife now. So you need to introduce me to people. And he learned. It doesn't mean he's ever not going to be an introvert. It doesn't mean it's ever going to be uber comfortable, but he can build a skill in it, and he has. And so that's what I would tell the introverts out there is you don't have to be any different than who you are. It's just know when you need to access a skill and know when you need to give yourself that breather.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, in the love types and the gift of shyness, we define introversion as energy seeking within. But shyness, I redefine it as extraordinary sensitivity to the environment. So you could be considered a highly sensitive person in terms of the way people affect you. And sometimes they can be easily hurt or maybe even self-conscious in those situations. So if you have a pure shy person, let's say they are somewhat self-conscious and they kind of judge themselves in that way, what do you teach them to be able to be more likable?
You have to like you first. So law number 2 is the law of self-image, and law number 3 is the law of perception. So just to give your listeners a structure for understanding these 11 laws, it's not a laundry list. The first 4 laws about mindset, about before a conversation, before an interaction, getting your head in the right place.
Yes.
The next 4 are about the conversation.
Right.
So, I almost think of it as the anatomy of a conversation. And then the last 3 are what we do after that conversation. How do we move from conversation to connection?
Wow, that's interesting. Now, with authenticity, the couple of things that you said are very interesting. You said authenticity can evolve. So I'm thinking maybe when you're younger, you may not be true to yourself, especially if you're the non-traditional types like a male feeler, or if you're a very intuitive person. And that doesn't fit in most societal areas. You may not accept yourself until later in life, later in years. And the other thing is, I think you said also it can depend on the person that you're with. Sometimes you're more authentic with one person versus the other. So how do those two factors come into play? The evolving and also the situational side.
There was just so much content in what you just said.
That's intuitive people. We do that, right?
So I want to break this apart. One of the things that you talked about was that we evolve over time.
Yes.
And that we evolved based on sometimes who we are with and what they kind of open the door for us to see in ourselves.
Yes.
So I do think, it's funny. I took some of these assessments before I had kids and after I had kids. And, there are things in our lives that we grow. I mean, I used to approach things very differently, and we can learn what works. And yes, we certainly do evolve over time. That said, I do think we're wired a certain way. Introversion and extroversion tend to be something that doesn't necessarily change, but our skill and abilities with it can grow. So I want to be clear with authenticity and self-image is that we can get a clearer picture of ourselves. But the way in which we are mentally wired, if we rely on facts versus feelings, the thinker versus the feeler, that can somewhat be innate. Yet we can increase our appreciation for the other perspective. You made a comment that male feelers are an anomaly. I would actually disagree with that. I mean, yes, there may be a higher percentage of female feelers than male feelers, right, but there's still a good portion of the population
at least 30
that are male feelers. And I would think that also it comes down to right brain or left brain thinkers. So right brain thinkers tend to be more feelers, whereas left brain thinkers tend to be more thinkers. So I hit some of the things you said. So
oh, okay.
But I didn't get back.
There's a lot of we can have a whole lecture just on one of these topics. But yeah, that's great. But basically, loving yourself, we talk a lot about that here in Love University. I think that's your law of self-image, is to love yourself first, and then you can start to resonate outwardly with that positive energy, I would imagine.
Yeah, so I say you have to like you first. Or how's anybody else supposed to like you if you don't like you?
Yes, of course.
And we tend to have a lot of negative self-talk. It can be anywhere from 77 to 90% of your inner critic is being mean. And so there's a technique I share in the book called Be Your Own Best Friend. And this is the idea of you have somebody in your life who probably is your cheerleader and your supporter and your believer. And when they tell you something, you believe them and you can hear it. But you don't tell yourself the things that somebody else will tell you. Wow. And so I say, you know what? They're not always there. Be your own best friend. Sit there and say, what would my BFF say to me right now? Okay, I'm gonna give myself those messages and start to shift your own inner conversation. And when you start to see you, right, the good in you, and the 3 words activity that I'm going to give your listeners, yes, it starts with getting clear on how you see yourself and how you want to be seen. And then we move into the perception and understanding how we're currently seen. Sometimes we are actually seen exactly as we want to be. And then we can just step into it and own it. I had a client once who went into a leadership position. He stepped up into a role, and it was a little more than he realized he was taking on. He was overwhelmed by it, and he was really stressed out. Mm-hmm. It was, he was on vacation and calls me for a coaching call. and I said, and he goes, I want them to think I'm on top of everything, and I got this. And I said to him, why? That's not your brand. I said, your brand is the guy who there was a question when he got the job about how would somebody know if you're stressed out? And the referral said, only if he tells you. I said, that's your brand. Your brand is the guy who can handle everything and stay even and calm and keep everybody in that space. I said, now you're deviating from your brand, and that's why you're being ineffective. And it was this light bulb that went off. And so sometimes when we think we're trying to be something that somebody else wants us to be.
Yeah, exactly. I can see you're a great coach. You're very optimistic and you're very positive. But you also talk about energy is not always bubbly. Sometimes, you can be a little bit, I guess, calm or even a little somber. So matching to someone's energy, I think you're saying, is an important thing. And we see this in NLP and other devices where we match and mirror people's energy. Why is that so important?
Absolutely. Energy was actually the first chapter I wrote in the whole book because nobody understood the concept. And the law is that energy is contagious. But I am completely on the same page with you regarding it does not have to be bubbly. We don't want hello all the time. It's just like I want to smack you now because that's not where my energy's at. So again, everything that I'm framing here for you is with another person. None of this lives in isolation. None of it matters to some extent in isolation. It really is how you bring yourself to the interaction. Right. And so we have some typical energy responses. We can brush somebody off. We get dismissive. We don't realize we're doing it, but we might say something like, oh, it's not that big a deal.
Right.
Right? We think we're calming them down. But we're minimizing them. We're showing them we're not really hearing them. We're not validating their feelings. Right. So brushing them off is really ineffective.
Right. Or you say you're being too emotional. You take everything personally. But if they're a feeler, that's what they do, right? They do take it personally.
Right. It becomes a judgment.
Yes.
We can add fuel to the fire. And this can be positive and this can be negative. So sometimes adding fuel to the fire would be escalating. Somebody's upset and you're like, oh my God, I'd be so upset too. You should go and do it. Right. And now you're really blowing smoke on those flames and it's going to explode. That's a negative add fuel to the fire. A positive adding fuel to the fire could be when somebody needs that encouragement. Before I went on the stage for my first international speech, it was a huge audience. It was in Asia. It was just a big difference from what I had done, about 4 years ago. And my son was there and he said, you're going to be great, Mommy. And that was adding fuel to my fire.
Ah,
I just breathed in that flame and
ah,
I rocked it. And so
right.
adding fuel to somebody's fire is an energy
Yes.
that can also be positive.
Right. So you had you had your own personal cheerleader in there at
Yes.
that moment.
And that can be so adding fuel to a fire is the second typical energy response. Could be positive, could be negative. You got to make your choice there. Extracting yourself is actually not a bad energy response. Sometimes the energy that you have versus the energy somebody else is bringing is really going to clash. And so extracting yourself and giving both parties time to bring a more productive energy is a fine energy response.
You know, like in married couples, they call it the timeout. When they're fighting, you know, someone goes to the gym and the other person goes shopping, and they come back and they're a little more relaxed, and
Yeah.
they can talk about things in a better way.
Extraction could be a great energy response as long as it's extracting yourself in a way that enables you to come back.
Exactly.
I was going to give you one more, and this is the
Yes.
one that I think really people need. And the best energy response, what I would advise is to meet people where they are. And I would say just under or just over, depending on if they're, kind of on the ledge, then you want to come in just under the ledge so you can start to bring them down, but at least let them feel heard and understood. And if they're really low, you don't want to come all the way high and perky because they can't feel related to. So meeting somebody where they are and then helping them shift their energy to a more productive place.
Now, Michelle, I know both of us are fast talkers. I'm because of my Latin background. I don't know. You're from New York. So what if you're a slow talker? What if you go like, how are you doing? Should I be slow at talking too to match you? Or what do you think is the best way to gain rapport?
So what you're referring to right now is mirroring.
Yes.
And mirroring tends to happen naturally when there is a connection between two people. Now, we can infuse mirroring intentionally, and I think it's a good technique, but I think it's one we need to be careful with, not overdoing it because it could become imitative and it could even be offensive if it's obvious. Yes. I have to be careful. I tend to pick up people's accents.
So if you go to the South and they're talking a little slow, are you going to start talking a little that way?
I had a roommate from college from Texas, and I was saying y'all for years. I had never been to Texas, but y'all
okay.
took about
But you're
years.
doing it sincerely. You're not trying to imitate them in an overt way where it makes them mad or anything.
But for me, I mean, I went in Australia, I was in Europe, and I would start. And it was a terrible accent, it would just come out. And so it can, come off as making fun of it. People may take things not the way you intend. And so with mirroring, I just ask people to think about the choices that we make with mirroring. When you are going to lean forward because they're leaning forward, don't do it as soon as they do it. Look for the pause and then lean forward when you speak. So it's more natural movement.
Right. I think some people are naturally more empathetic and they kind of pick up emotions easier. We know what's called mood contagion, where we pick up on the negative emotions of others, or they pick up on our emotions. So I like the fact you say we got to be aware of our own feelings when we walk into a room, and then see what we want to infuse the room with, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. But what if you're very vulnerable and you're around what we call the negative vampires, people that drain you and are very negative and critical? How does a sensitive person protect themselves from the vampires?
These are phrases that I'm not accustomed to. Vampires, because they're sucking and draining your energy.
Yes.
Well, we think about those energy responses, and that in that situation, it might be extracting yourself as a good energy response, remaining neutral, right, and saying, this is about them, this is not about me. You can't necessarily turn them or change them. You only want to choose how much energy you want to give to a person who is just going to take it and deflate it.
Right.
So you have to make choices with how you're expending your energy, because energy is finite, right? We don't have endless energy, and we don't have endless time. We make choices with those things that are finite. And if that's not some place that you want to put your energy, then you don't have to.
Yeah, I think of a metaphor like, you're a doctor and you're in a hospital and the patient's screaming at you, but you offer the medicine, but you don't take it personally. You say, take the medicine if you like. If not, I go home to my home and, hopefully you get better. But sometimes people take it personally.
That's a different situation.
Yes.
Right. So that's a very different situation because the doctor is there in a professional capacity. And if a doctor was saying, well, take the medicine or don't, I don't care, I wouldn't think they're a very good doctor.
Right. But what if the patient's saying, you SOB, I hate you, doctor, you're the worst in the world? Is a doctor going to feel bad about that? Or is he going to or he or she's going to do her job?
So I've actually done a lot of work with doctors in hospitals.
Yes. Okay, good.
Because there's actually a correlation between their malpractice insurance and rates of being sued and their likability.
Yes.
It's very highly correlated. Even if a doctor has made a mistake, if the patient likes you, they will not sue you.
Wow. So it's very important to teach the bedside manner should be coming back these days.
Oh my God, yes.
The positive energy.
If there's any doctors out there, let me tell you, your relationship with your patient is not just impacting their health and your sanity, but it's also impacting your malpractice and lawsuit rates. So if a doctor was getting screamed at by a patient, again, you may need the temporary extract yourself solution, but it's a temporary solution in that situation.
Right.
And then come back and say, I wanted to give you some time.
Right.
I'm here. Let's talk. You're upset. Here's why. It's understandable. Here are your options. How can I best help you? And I also might bring in other resources. So I wouldn't advise a doctor to just be like, take it or leave it. I'm just going to take my energy and go. That's not their job, is to help a patient.
Right.
And if emotions are part of that, then emotions are part of that. That's your job.
Right. So we need to have a psychologist in every hospital, I think, just for a patient relationship.
And then bring in the psychologist resource. Yep.
I like that. Now, the other thing is, this is one I really like, is you talk about the law of curiosity, and I call it the law of empathy. But basically being interested in other people and generally, wanting to know more about them. And I often do this when I go places. I talk to a lot of people and ask them, what is your dream in life? What do you want to do in life? So I really care about that. And you think that builds relationships when you have that natural curiosity about others?
Absolutely. I literally just got back from doing a talk in Washington State where I had a group of introverted techie professionals. And we talked about this anatomy of a conversation. And I said, when you don't know where to start by being curious. Ask a question you actually want to know the answer to, and then see where that conversation takes you. So it's not just about empathy, but about finding points of similar interest or similar experience or similar value, so that we can have a connection, because curiosity creates connections. That's what the law of curiosity is. And when you ask questions, you can then find those points of you too, me too, and then we start to build our bond.
What if there are people I run across that said, I don't really care about other people. I have enough problems of my own. You can call them self-contained people that don't really have that desire to know others, or even care about their point of view, the empathy. So what do you say to those folks? They say, I'm just here to make money, and I'm going to do it my way. So what is your advice to them?
Well, you want to make more money?
Right.
Here's the thing. If people don't value relationships, it is not for me to force them to understand it. It's me to show them, whether it's on the feeler side or the thinker side. And so the first chapter of my new book actually talks about all the things that people tend to want, right? Whether it's a new job, a promotion, to start a business, to be healthier, to be happier. And I give you statistics on how relationships help every single one of those aspects of what people tend to say they want.
That makes a lot of sense. I think you probably save a lot of married couples too, if we taught them these same techniques.
I've never personally done any marriage counseling, but I think that these techniques absolutely work in the home. I will say that I've done a lot of blog posts. I'm sure you'll share a link to my blog about how motherhood and management are really similar. And a lot of the lessons that I have taught within management, I have taken and used in the home, and vice versa.
Okay. They even had some studies that they show that people who are curious or even open to meeting people actually have more luck. Let's say you're waiting in line at a movie theater or something, you start talking to someone you don't know, and they may turn out to be a good contact, a friend, or even give you some useful advice. But the people that are optimists, usually have that personality. They're open to meeting people and learning more about them.
Well, that's what being a connector is being open to connections and where they may lead. I actually tell a story in my book, and I start with saying, I'm not lucky. I'm a connector. And you might think that people are lucky. It's not that they're lucky. It's that they are connecting to others. I just flew back from that talk in Washington, and I was sitting next to somebody, and I simply turned and I said, do you know if the middle seat is empty? He was in the window, and I was in the aisle, and I had a bunch of extra stuff.
Right.
And he said 2 hours ago it was. And so we kind of joked. And when they closed the doors, we both did a fist bump. We're like, yes. And so we both dumped our stuff in the middle seat. And we ended up chatting at the beginning of the flight and then chatting at the end of the flight. We did our own thing. It wasn't like an endless conversation. Right. And at the end of it, he basically said, we hire speakers. Let me get you connected to our company. Exactly. I wasn't looking for it.
Exactly. So you created your own opportunity. You could call it luck, or you could just say opportunity or way to get something good. But the key is you're open to it. You're open to it as opposed to people who are closed-minded.
Just showing up open. There we go.
Exactly. But then you just say the law of similarity. We like people who are like us. Mm-hmm. Now, are you saying we should match them to be like them, or do we find people that are already like us? What's the best approach?
It's actually finding what similarities we have. Sometimes we focus on our differences, and most of the time there's a similarity that's not obvious, and we just need to look for it. And that's what curiosity can enable. I've had meetings where I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to talk about? We have nothing in common. We're not the same gender. We're not the same age. We're not the same industry. We're not the same, right? And you focus on all the ways you're not the same. So why don't instead you look for, well, what are the things that we have in common? What are the things that we do connect on? You and I found that we both like dogs.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, we like dogs, and we're both, I think, intuitive and feeling from the personalities. So that's kind of cool. And so that's a good way to connect, right, based on similarities. But what if you also have some opposites? Can that be good complementary-wise? Like you have strengths that I don't have and vice versa?
Absolutely. And that's understanding and appreciating how we complement each other. One of the things, I'm actually doing a program this Friday where I talk about how the people who are most different from us are our best collaborative work partners because they bring that other perspective.
Exactly. Now, the couple of here ones I really like, these are kind of almost psycho-spiritual in a sense. And I have a new book that talks about these kind of elements, Invincible You. One of them is called patience. And patience is something a lot of people really don't have, and they often become irritable. They feel that there's a time crunch, they have to do too many things. And also technology kind of makes them kind of antsy. I need an answer immediately, give me a text, or otherwise we're done. How do we teach people patience? I talk about having like a technology fast where you put away your phone for 4 hours, but can you guys do that in business? Is that too difficult?
Well, patience is the last law of the book and probably the hardest for me as well. And what I'm really talking about is patience with enabling the relationship to grow in its own time, and patience with your results, and patience with your ability to help others. So it's patience with ourselves, patience with others, patience with the relationships. Patience with my kids, I'm still working on.
Or your dog or something, right?
Exactly.
That makes sense. And then this one here, and this is a good way to kind of like wrap up the stuff, is the law of giving. And again, you and I think very similar. I talk about giving love without expectation as a positive thing. Even in the financial world, when you give to others, you can often create good opportunities, business-wise or otherwise. You create bonds of positive affinity, what I call it, positive energy when you do that. So it's not always like trying to get the best bargain or drive the last dollar out of a person, but kind of create a relationship. How do you see that part of it?
Well, you started with and ended with the two most important laws. So authenticity and giving for me are the two most important laws in the book.
Yes.
Giving creates value. And my feeling is give because you can, give because you want to, give because, give without expectation of anything in return. And when you do, we create a giving mentality. And in the new book, The Connector's Advantage, I talk about the mindsets of a connector. One of the mindsets is having a generous spirit. And so that spirit of generosity, that mindset of being helpful and being given and being of service to others, it doesn't necessarily negate your own results or your own asks or your own needs and wants. You can get those too. But they might not be from the people that you give. It's not quid pro quo. It's not linear.
Yes, that makes sense. I mean, what I see here, and I like this a lot, but I'm wondering how the business world takes it. The idea of bringing emotional, even almost spiritual elements, compassion, empathy, generosity into a business sector. Are they finding this useful for them? If you can tie it into bottom lines?
Yes.
That's the key, right? Tie it into the bottom line.
Yeah, and because you can equate it to bottom lines. I have a lot of statistics. I mean, so the number one driver of engagement is the belief that leadership has their best interests at heart. And when you are engaged, you are trying your hardest at work. You're highly productive. And a highly productive and engaged workforce out-earns others by over 200%.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, the statistics are there that relationships impact your bottom line.
That makes sense, yeah. So bringing that into that workforce can be a great thing if they buy into it. But, they used to call it the soft science, the soft thing of psychology and, touchy-feely stuff. but you're quantifying it as an objective thing that can actually benefit them and make them more money. Now, I do want to kind of build into the connector. I'd love to have you back for when your book comes out. When is your book coming out? The
March 5th, 2019. And anybody who is on my mail list on that day can download the book for free.
No way. You can.
Yep.
Wow. Now, you're being too generous there, Michelle. Isn't that going overboard?
So here's the thing. As I said, be generous and don't forget what you're looking for and make your asks as well. All I ask is that people who download the book post an honest review of the book on Amazon.
I see. That's really cool. And that's great. And then you also talk about networking as the way to have relationships. And I have a workshop I do called Networking with Love. I mean, it could be friends, business, or romance. So we talk about these ideas, positive energy, and I'd love to maybe have you come out sometime. Do you ever get out to California at all? Do you ever travel?
I do. I don't travel all the time, but I do travel. So if there's an event, absolutely reach out to me.
Yeah, let's talk to I guess, where are you based? Are you out of New York?
I'm a Jersey girl.
Oh, should I say Jersey or Jersey?
Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl.
Okay. So if I get out there, that would be great. Now, one little thing here, I want to ask you some personal advice. I'm not really very good at follow up, they call it, I think. I'm very good at making connections initially, but I kind of forget and do a lot of things. What's the importance of follow up? Is there a way to get that done well?
I think we need a whole other hour for that question.
Oh, are you serious? Is that one of your connector ideas for the new book?
There's certainly some things in there. I do full talks on how to follow up.
Wow.
But let me just give you a quick reason why. Yes. Because if there's no follow up, there's no relationship.
Exactly. What's a quick tip for people that don't follow up, us procrastinators?
It's never too late. My tip is it's never too late. I have a graveyard of business cards on my desk, and every once in a while I find one. I was like, oh, I remember this person. And I might it could be 6 months later, I might send me saying, hey, I just found your business card.
Right. I guess we're afraid of rejection that, think, hey, what happened to you? Don't really care. You didn't contact me earlier. So how do you get rid of that fear of rejection?
You know what? If you don't reach out, the relationship isn't there. If you reach out, you increase your odds.
Okay. Excellent. Perfect.
So play the odds.
I like that. This is really wonderful stuff. I can see this applicable in love and business and many things in life, even personal development. It's been great to have you on board, Michelle. This has been a very thorough, entertaining show.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Where can people hear more about you, and what do you do? Do you do coaching or any other stuff that people can get a hold of you about?
There's lots of information that I have out there for people for free resources. The best place is to go to my website, Michelle, Michelle, Tillis, Tillis, Lederman, Lederman.com. From there, you can get to my YouTube channel. I've got a whole series of videos with 1-minute tips. You can get to my blog. You can get to any of the books. You can get to my LinkedIn, my Facebook, the professional one, not the personal one, Twitter, all of that stuff. So there's lots of ways to connect with me. My website is probably the best hub. And on my website, you can actually put your email address in so that you're on the list for the new book. And in the meantime, you can get free chapters from my other books, the 3 words exercise I've been telling you about, a success accelerator series, networking assessments. I got tons of good stuff out there.
Wow.
As for me, what I do, I usually am brought out to do keynote speaking at engagements or full-day trainings. I don't do a ton of one-on-one coaching, but I do a little.
That's what you're saying. Wow, that's incredible. I can see your extrovert energy and also your organizational style just by that response. You do it all. So if anybody...
I was in finance for 10 years, so I still have that left brain side.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, yeah. So if anyone wants to talk about today's show, ask us questions, or be on the show in the future, you can reach us at lovetype4u@aol.com. That's LOVETYPE, the number 4, letter U at AOL. Our website, loveuniversity.love. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can reach us at 310-226-8090 for any personal questions. So again, Michelle, it's been a pleasure having you on board, and we definitely look forward to seeing you and connecting with you on March. And until then, Love University students, put away your laptop, your iBooks, your iPhones, and go out and connect with people and be likable or as best you can. See you next time.